Today, I'm going to give you a brief overview of the verb voices in Turkish, with a couple of examples, but without technical depth. Verb voice is called fiil çatısı in Turkish, fiil çatısı. And here are the verb voices that I'm going to talk about today. Passive verbs, reflexive verbs, reciprocal verbs, transitive verbs, intransitive verbs, causative verbs, and a little bit of combinations of them. So let's dive in. First, passive verbs. In Turkish, edilgen çatılı fiiller. Edilgen çatılı fiiller. To form the passive form of a verb, the verb root or stem receives the le or ne suffixes. Depending on how the root or stem of the verbs end, vowel or consonant, the suffixes can appear as le, ne, il, il, ul, ül, in, un, or ün, according to the vowel harmony. For example, okumak is an infinitive verb. Okumak, to read. To obtain the verb root, we drop mak. So the root of this infinitive verb is oku. Oku. We attach the passive voice suffix ne, and then what we obtain is okun. Okun. This is the verb stem. When we attach mak once again to this verb stem, we again obtain an infinitive verb, but this time in the passive form such as okunmak, okunmak, to be read. Now, when we want to conjugate this infinitive verb, we need to attach the necessary suffixes to this verb stem. Here is an example. Okun is the verb stem. Du is the noun past tense suffix. Okundu, okundu. Now, let's form a sentence using this conjugated verb. Kitap okundu. Kitap okundu. The book was read. Another example with the infinitive verb yazmak. Yazmak, to write. The root of the verb is yaz. Yaz. This root receives the passive voice suffix il since it ends in a consonant. Yazıl, yazıl. And when we attach mak to this verb stem, again we obtain an infinitive verb. Yazılmak, yazılmak, to be written. Yazıl is the verb stem. Iyor is the present continuous tense suffix. Yazılıyor, yazılıyor. Now let's form a sentence using this conjugated verb. Mektup yazılıyor. Mektup yazılıyor. The letter is being written. In the sentences with passive verbs, the subject is not the doer of the action. Because of this, we call this type of subject an implied subject. In Turkish, sözde özne. Sözde özne. Kitap okundu. Mektup yazılıyor. As you see, the actual doer of the action is not mentioned in these sentences. Who read the book and who is writing the letter is not mentioned. I will talk about these details later in other videos. Now, reflexive verbs. In Turkish, dönüşlü çatılı fiiller. Dönüşlü çatılı fiiller. To form the reflexive form of a verb, the verb root or stem receives again le or ne suffixes. As you see, the suffixes are the same with the passive voice suffixes. So how do we know the difference? In the sentences with reflexive verbs, the subject is actually the doer of the action. In addition, the subject is the one who is affected by that action. Let's consider the infinitive verb yıkamak. Yıkamak, to wash. The root is yıka. Yıka. This receives the reflexive voice suffix ne. So the stem we obtain is yıkan. Yıkan. Now, let's form a sentence by adding the noun past tense suffix to this verb stem. Ali yıkandı. Ali yıkandı. Ali washed himself. In this sentence, the subject Ali is the doer of the action, and it is the one who is affected by that action. Therefore, in this sentence, the verb is a reflexive verb. And the idiomatic translation of this sentence is Ali took a shower. However, when we form a sentence such as çamaşırlar yıkandı, çamaşırlar yıkandı, then the verb voice becomes passive because the subject is not the doer of the action and the laundry cannot wash itself. Fundamentally, this is how you can recognize the difference between reflexive and passive verbs, even though they both use the same suffixes. Now, reciprocal verbs. In Turkish, İşteş çatılı fiiller. İşteş çatılı fiiller. Reciprocal verbs are formed by adding the suffix "şe" to the verb root or stem. Depending on how the root or stem of the verbs end, vowel or consonant, the suffix can appear as "şe", "ış", "iş", "uş", or "üş", according to the vowel harmony. The action expressed by these verbs have the meaning of doing something mutually or together. Let's consider the infinitive verb tanımak. Tanımak, to know a person, to recognize. The root of the verb is tanı. Tanı. This receives the suffix "şe", and what we obtain is tanış. Tanış. Now, let's form a sentence by adding the noun past tense suffix to this verb stem. Ali ile Hülya tanıştılar. Ali ile Hülya tanıştılar. Literally, Ali and Hülya have known each other. This action has been done mutually. And the idiomatic translation of this sentence is Ali and Hülya met. Now, let's take a look at the infinitive verb gülmek. Gülmek, to laugh. When we add the reciprocal suffix to the verb root, what we obtain is gülüş. Gülüş. Mehmet, Gonca ve Derya gülüşüyorlar. Mehmet, Gonca ve Derya gülüşüyorlar. Mehmet, Gonca and Derya are laughing together. Here, this action is done at the same time and together. Now, transitive verbs. In Turkish, geçişli fiiller. Geçişli fiiller. In basic terms, the transitive verbs are the verbs that can take an object. For example, okumak, to read, öpmek, to kiss, öğrenmek, to learn, sevmek, to like, to love, beklemek, to wait, yemek, to eat. All of these verbs are transitive verbs and they can take an object. Here are two examples. Ben kitap okuyorum. Ben kitap okuyorum. I'm reading a book. In this sentence, kitap is the object, specifically indefinite direct object. Seni seviyorum. Seni seviyorum. I love you. In this sentence, seni is the object, specifically definite direct object. By the way, even there is no object present in a sentence, the verb can still be transitive as long as it has the capacity to take an object. Now, intransitive verbs. In Turkish, geçişsiz fiiller. Geçişsiz fiiller. In basic terms, intransitive verbs are the verbs that do not take an object. For example, ağlamak, to cry, gülmek, to laugh, uyumak, to sleep, düşmek, to fall. All of these verbs are intransitive and they do not take an object. Next, causative verbs. In Turkish, there are two types of them. Oldurgan çatılı fiiller and ettirgen çatılı fiiller. Now, let's take a look at oldurgan çatılı fiiller. These verbs are formed by adding t, re, or tır suffixes to the verb root or stem. Depending on how the verb root or stem ends, and according to the vowel harmony and consonant mutation, these suffixes can appear in many different forms, as you can see in the screen. In this verb voice, these suffixes turn intransitive verbs into transitive verbs. Let's consider the intransitive verb gülmek. Gülmek, to laugh. When we add the suffix dür to this verb root according to the vowel harmony, what we obtain is güldür, güldür. And when we attach mek to this verb stem, what we obtain is, again, an infinitive verb. Güldürmek, güldürmek, to make someone laugh. This is a causative verb, and specifically oldurgan çatılı fiil, because we formed the transitive verb güldürmek from the intransitive verb gülmek. Here is an example. Derya çocukları güldürdü. Derya çocukları güldürdü. Derya made the children laugh. In this sentence, çocukları is the definite direct object. In this type of causative verbs, the action is performed by the subject. Another example, uyumak. Uyumak, to sleep, an intransitive verb. The suffix we use for this verb is te. We add it and we obtain uyutmak. Uyutmak, to make someone sleep. Anne çocuğu uyutuyor. Anne çocuğu uyutuyor. Literally, the mother is making the child sleep. And idiomatically, the mother is putting the child to sleep. Here, çocuğu is the definite direct object. Now, let's take a look at the other type of causative verbs. Ettirgen çatılı fiiller. These verbs are formed by adding the te, re, and dır suffixes to the verb stem or root. As you see, the same suffixes as before. Then, what is the difference? In this verb voice, these suffixes are attached to already transitive verbs, and the degree of transitivity is increased. It may sound weird, but hold on, it will be clear. Remember, in the sentences with the previous type of causative verbs, oldurgan çatılı fiiller, the action is performed by the subject of the sentence. Here, in the sentences with ettirgen çatılı fiiller, the action is mostly not performed directly by the subject, but rather by an intermediary. The subject either makes a second person do the action or has the action done by a third person through a second person as an intermediary. Yes, this is also possible. Now, let's consider the infinitive verb almak. Almak, to take, to receive, to buy, to get. This verb is transitive. It can take an object. The root of the verb is al. It receives dır according to the vowel harmony. Therefore, what we obtain is, as an infinitive verb, aldırmak. Aldırmak. To make someone buy, to make someone get. Here is an example. Annem ekmek aldırdı. Annem ekmek aldırdı. My mother made someone buy bread. Here, buying bread was made to be performed by a second person, by my mom. My mom didn't buy the bread, but someone else who is not mentioned in this sentence bought it. In this sentence, ekmek is the object. Aldırmak is a causative verb, right? Well, it is possible to add another causative suffix to this verb stem, such as aldırtmak. Aldırtmak. In this infinitive verb, there are two causative voice suffixes, dır and te. Here's a similar example. Annem ekmek aldırttı. Annem ekmek aldırttı. My mother made someone To get someone else to buy bread. As you see, my mom didn't buy the bread. The second person didn't buy the bread, but the third person bought it. In addition to all of these, more than one voice suffix can be attached to the verb root or stance. I will only show you one or two examples for today. Yapmak is a transitive verb. Yapmak, to do, to make. Yaptırmak is a causative verb, specifically ettirgen, to make someone do. Yaptırılmak is a causative passive verb. Yaptırılmak. So there's a causative suffix and there's a passive suffix. Here's an example. Proje başka bir firmaya yaptırıldı. Proje başka bir firmaya yaptırıldı. The project was made to be done by another company. There are more forms that can be formed by reciprocal, reflexive, causative, and passive, but I leave them for another video. This has been a little bit long overview, but I hope you liked it. If you have any questions or if you would like to try yourself, just write me a couple of examples using these verb voices in the comment section. I would like to take a look at them. Well, thank you very much for today. See you in the next videos. Görüşmek üzere.